Okay, we are live. Tony, would you step up so the camera can see you and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
So my name is Tony Kendall. I'm with PROLON Controls. A little bit about my background. I started my career as an electrician. I went through an apprenticeship program. I got into some PLC and some DCS stuff, and then there were some HVAC guys that were like, hey, we think you probably could help us with HVAC control. And about 15 years ago, I kind of got sucked into HVAC control. So I've installed it, I've programmed it, I've tech jobs, I've engineered jobs, managed departments, I've worked for a distributor, and then I came to work for PROLON. One of the reasons that I came to work for PROLON is there's a demand in the market for the light commercial building space that's typically kind of overlooked by usually the big control systems, and it usually is a cost thing. When we talk about, you know, we would like to have control. A lot of people now have Ring doorbells. I know people who will stop working to look at their Ring doorbell because their Amazon package is being delivered. And what that's causing in our society is more and more demand for people to be able to see things from their phone. And we're hearing more and more and more that, you know, the people who manage these buildings, who own these buildings, they're looking for ways to access information in their building. The other thing that we have seen, I would be interested to hear your opinion on it. A trend that we're seeing more and more is that facilities are having less and less and less facilities people.
Yes.
And they're putting the responsibility onto the mechanical contractor that they hire, and they kind of have high expectations sometimes. Whereas a facility guy may hang around in the building all the time and kind of know the nuances of the building. He learns what they are. You know, he learns who's cold, who's hot. Those days are kind of behind us. We don't see that as much. And so because of that, the industry is now being tasked with, how do I service my customer who doesn't have anyone on site and now wants me to do it. So for us, we focus literally on the light commercial space. There are other products out there. I don't typically ever have anything bad to say about anybody else's products, but sometimes the products that exist in the market, if you get a quote for them and you take that to the customer while the customer wants it, and while they want you to service their building better, they're not necessarily interested in the cost. So where we try to focus on the market is providing a economical solution that sort of meets that request for the customer. So sometimes you may, right, you're gonna get you need to control something, or you need to look at it remotely, and you get a cost for a more programmable system. Those systems tend to be a little bit more expensive, and due to that expense, when you take that price back to the end user, they're going to come back and say, yeah, no, I want this, but I don't want this. It's just too expensive. So what I wanted to do this evening, the main thing that I wanted to go over, because RSAS is really a technical platform in my opinion, so I kind of wanted to just show you our website, kind of how you find information, and I really wanted to show and convey how the software works, and then sort of the features and how you would actually use this if this was something that you were going to think about deploying on jobs. The other thing, if there's some questions towards the end about, you know, strategies with the product in regards to relationships with your customers, I tell people PROLON is a business strategy. It's something that you think about to manage your relationship with your customer and help you have that proactive relationship with your customer. It's not just a product that you're trying to put in everywhere, especially if you maintain preventative maintenance agreements with your customers. It gives you an opportunity to access their sites, get into their sites very easily. Not only that, it's relatively easy for multiple technicians to learn, and the learning curve compared to some of the other products, it's not near as steep. So I'm going to start with our website. Like I touched on, all of our products are application specific, meaning that the application comes pre-programmed inside the controller. All you're going to do is set up what that configuration looks like based on the type of equipment. So a lot of people say, well, how do I even begin to know like what your stuff can do? And this is where I'm going to start at the website. So when we talk about products, you're going to see under controllers, I did drop off a little pamphlet in front of everyone. Our controllers kind of show you, you know, these are the types of equipment that we can control. You can further go into each of them. So for example, if you have a rooftop controller, right, you can go inside of the rooftop controller. Still connected to the internet?
Yeah, it's circling up there. No,
Is it? Okay. Yeah, it's really thinking. Anyways, once you go inside of the rooftop controller, essentially there's a couple of choices. What we do, we really have two controllers. We have a C1050, which looks like this guy right here. And then all of our controllers, when they come out, have a quick start guide. So all of our outputs have a special designation, and I'll pass these around. Inside the quick start guide, a lot of technicians keep the quick start guides because the quick start guide tells you what the I/O is, right? What is fan start stop? What is discharge air? So when you get the controller out of the box, they'll come with the quick start guides, and there's all the different applications. So when we go in here, I'm passing the C1050 around now. This is the M2000. It kind of just tells you the difference between the two, what they have, what their features are. If you need to get a little bit more information on them, our documentation tab, right, a data sheet is a data sheet, but the hardware guide is going to show you a little bit more information as far as how you start things up. So as you kind of move down this path, Adam with Cochran Supply will do a very good job of helping you, right, pick your parts and pieces. But if you're sort of self-starter, want to do it yourself, you want to find the information for yourself, this is where you're going to find it. The focus guide is when we get into the software, and if you have questions about setting it up. The other thing to remember about PROLON, our software is free. There's an app that you can download on your phone. It's called the PROLON app. So the app is actually free, and then you can create a cloud account, and that component is free as well. So for those that want to try that tonight, we actually have the PL485 BT, which is what I refer to as a commissioning tool. So what we're going to do is be able to connect from the laptop to the controllers, and then we'll be able to create a project. And then if you had an account, I could share that project with you. You then could take your phone, you have that project, and if you had a PL485 BT, you could walk up to this, plug into it, and you're going to be able to see everything you need to see inside of it. So what we're trying to convey to you is that, you know, maybe you built the project, but maybe you have to go service it because he's not available, right? The project is shared with you. You can get it on your cell phone. You have a PL485 BT. Well, hopefully the customer gave you internet access. If they give you internet access outbound, then you can connect to it remotely. So let me move on to the next piece, which is the software, because I know it was a hot day and I don't want to keep you guys here too long. What's that?
That's your, yeah, we're an AC now.
I know, but there's no place like home. So you can connect to the network controller a couple of ways. My preference that I always use is the PL485 BT tool. When you're using a laptop, it connects via USB, and then the USB has the RS485, and then we connect into the network controller on this component here. So we're literally jumping into this just like it's we're on the network. One thing I do need to check, I have to close this down for a minute. Do you know what COM port it usually uses, Adam?
It's always different depending on which,
Looks like COM 3. Yeah. For right now, I'm just going to continue as a guest. I'm going to create the project and then we'll import it into your account. That's okay with you?
Yep.
So it's gonna say COM3. So now it shows you that I'm connected. I'm going to save us a little bit of time. I know by default our MAC address of our network controller comes out as 99. So we have a process. If you've never been on a project before and you don't know what's there, we have a process that's called a discovery process. So what I tell people is, if you go to a site, because a lot of control systems, right, what's the number one problem? You typically don't have the username and password to get in, right? That's typically the number one issue. One of the things that we believe at PROLON is that if an end user bought a system, that the system is theirs, while they may not understand it and they may not be able to work on it, we believe that anyone that has access and knows where this is at and understands how to work on PROLON should have the ability to work on it. So if you know where this device is at in a building, and you have a PL485BT and you've downloaded the free software, you would literally be able to go to a job, even if you've never been there before, and do what I just did, which is a discover process. It went out, it found my parent controller or master controller, which is the rooftop, and then there are 2 zone controllers underneath of it. So that's a part of the discovery process. So you don't have to have a username and password. I got a call one time, a guy's on a job, says, hey, we've got tasked with integrating this project. There's PROLON. I don't know what to do. I said, send me a picture of the box. Do you have a box that says NC2000? He said, I don't know. He sent me a picture. I said, I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. I met him there. He downloaded the software. In about 10 minutes, we were able to discover everything. They were able to see how many zones were there. They were able to see how many rooftops were there, and they were able to make some changes. Yes?
Now, what about keeping hackers out of there?
I was
This
just
one
gonna ask
employee
that.
wants to mess
So
stuff up.
I will tell you, if there's a disgruntled employee and the installing contractor did not put that in a room that could be locked, like a mechanical room, that is a mistake. So we would always advise that this needs to be installed in a room that's secure. And typically someone's gonna have to let you in that room. However, the thing to note is that these are configurable controllers. So the worst thing that someone could do is change the configuration. You can't wipe the controller completely out. So like this controller came pre-programmed as a rooftop unit, so it's already got the rooftop program in it. Now, what I will say is we're gonna get to a part, but you kinda got ahead of me, so I'll just go ahead and explain it. We're gonna build this off-site. Adam's got a cloud account. I'm gonna log into his cloud account. When I'm done, I'll be able to import that cloud account, and I'll be able to do what's called a snapshot. The snapshot saves all the configurations at the end of that project.
Thanks.
So that if somebody does do something like that, you have a, last time I was there, this is what it was.
You can store that on a disk or anything, right?
We can store it in the cloud. The snapshot has to be on the cloud, but yes, you can actually store it. You can save a copy of this file on your local computer, or there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can store it on the cloud, the project on the cloud, you can store the snapshot on the cloud, and then if you're looking at it from a mechanical standpoint, like I was picking on these guys earlier, like let's say he originally did the job and maybe you got called out and you thought something was different and you changed a configuration that you didn't mean to change. When he built the job, he shared it with you, right? We're just gonna assume you guys work at the same company, right? He shared it with you. And if you go call him and say, hey man, I made a mistake, I didn't mean to do that, he says, it's not a problem. We have a thing that you can do, it's called apply template, and you would go look at the snapshot. So I will show you that before we leave today, because that is a big question, like, hey, what happens if somebody messes it up? What happens if they made a change that we didn't want them to make?
Now, you said these come pre-programmed
They are pre-programmed, yep.
as like a rooftop unit or hydronic?
Yeah, rooftop, fan coil unit, makeup air, a flex IO,
Geothermal.
yeah, geothermal. So there's a handful of boiler controller, chiller controller, and then we have what's called a Flex IO controller as well.
How many, so like on the hydronic system, how many valves and pumps could you put on one controller?
So typically, if you're talking like a boiler plant, we typically just do 2 pumps. So if you're like, oh, I got 3 or 4 pumps, we can't do a whole bunch of lead lag. If you want to schedule them,
I mean, what if each pump's doing different things, different zones?
yeah, it depends on how the hydronic system is designed. But if you have like 2, let's just say you got 2 air-cooled chillers and 2 lead pumps for that, you could do that. If you've got like 2 old school Bob McLean boilers and just 2 pumps, we can do that. We just lead lag. But if you're like, oh, I got 4 pumps that I want to lead lag, or if you're like, I just have a domestic hot water pump, well, we could turn your domestic hot water pump on and off with like a Flex IO.
So you do light commercial, not Chevrolet plant or something?
Nope.
Like that? Light
No.
commercial.
Yeah, it really is light commercial. That is the market that typically, typical PROLON job is gonna be, we started with VAV, actually with VVT, rooftops and VVT. And that's a lot of our business. But you get different people who do different things. Our Flex IO controller is sort of like Honeywell T775 on steroids with a whole bunch of different outside air resets, and we can do a lot of different things with that. And then you could put it under a network controller, and then you can see it from your phone. So, yeah. So I know every once in a while Adam has a class in Cleveland. I don't know, is there one scheduled for the fall?
Maybe coming up in September or August.
Okay. And we are changing our training format. It used to just be 1 day, but 1 day is not long enough. So we're going to a 2-day format, and then we're changing from a lecture only format to a lecture lab format. And they're gonna ask people, like, if you're gonna attend that class, that you have like a laptop, and then I think the demo boards are gonna have, because we have pre-built panels that have the display on the front. I believe the trainers, are gonna have a tablet on the front as well. And that really will give you, that gets super deep into the weeds on how everything is configured. I think my goal for today was to kind of show you like some of the configuration screens, and then some of the tools that you can use to like save your job and those things, and then how some of it saves off. And then what sets us apart from some of the other devices that exist is that if you have this tool and you have a phone or a tablet, you can configure these controllers even if you don't have a network controller or the job's not complete. So like that rooftop controller, if I wire a return air sensor into it, I can go inside of it and tell it to use the return air sensor, right, to stage my cooling, heating on and off, and use that as a demand until the rest of the zones are done. Because, right, I think we can all agree now, somebody sets a unit Thursday night and they're like, well, this should be running Friday morning, right? And you're like, well, no, there's like 10 or 12 zones off of it. We have a lot of startup to still do. But they want air conditioning. Like, people just don't have patience anymore, right? Like we have to be honest with you. Well, that's the problem. I know. And I mean, we just have to be realistic, right? And that's a problem that we would get. So that's why we had to program in a feature that says select to use the return temperature, because as soon as the unit's set almost anymore, I mean, they want you to have it wired and running. Like, they just think it should be immediate. I mean, it's the reality of what we face, and it's not. I don't think it's going to go away. So. There are things like that we've added based on the demand. So, do you guys see that? Is that a fair assessment, or am I just being mean to people? Yeah. They're like, I need it now, and you're like, yeah, okay. So I want to talk about the zones. So if we go into the zones, our graphics are what are referred to as self-adapting, which means as I make changes to a zone, you're not actually going to have to build the graphic, right? So our software knows that this is a certain type of a controller. So in our software, under config is where you're gonna, everything you need to set this up. So when you go to the device, it's gonna tell us what the device is. Because it knows what the device is, it knows what's in it. So for example, if I come in here and say, well, this is not a fan powered box. I don't have a duct heater. And there is no discharge air. Right? What happens is the graphic changes.
Not anymore.
So, something to know, when we look through our configuration parameters, like here, if you didn't want to show like the temperature coming from the air handling unit, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that, but typically you're going to want to know what the temperature coming down the ductwork is. You could turn that off. If you said, hey, I have a baseboard that's a digital output, you know, it's going to change the baseboard and it's going to take that temperature off. So we refer to them as dynamic. Sometimes people are like, well, the rooftop, the fan is over here. Unfortunately, they are sort of predetermined. So if it's not exactly, the equipment will still run. It's just not going to look exactly the way you want. And we can't move those things around. And our temperature, so when we talk about our wall modules, we do two ways. We have communicating wall modules. This one is a T1000. This one is a T200. Then we have a T500, which is this guy. I'll pass this around this way here. And what they do is they communicate with the controller. We do have a analog version, which is this one, which is like 10K type 3. So we don't use any sort of proprietary temperature sensors. It's all 10K type 3 stuff. The analog set point is a little bit different. I don't exactly know what it is. But what you can do, right, is all of the parameters are inside of the controller. So even if I were to swap, and something else to know while I'm doing this, is our T1000 has a mode called visualization mode. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to use it sort of as a commissioning device or as a troubleshooting device. Because these communicate, I can take that one off, move it over, and I can take this one and plug it in here, and it'll still work. So a lot of times people are like, hey, dude, I don't want my customer to see the temperature. Like, if they see the temperature, they're going to be calling me all the time. Like, and I'm not having it, right? I don't want no part of it. So people will be like, I want to buy that guy. But then it's like, okay, we can do that. But with the T1000, you can keep it as a commissioning tool. So a lot of times what will happen is technicians will have one of these. So if you go into it, it will show you what your inputs and outputs are doing. It'll show you what your current set points are. And then this one, it actually has like 59 and 86. We also make this one with plus or minus, right? Because we don't want them to know. So even if you give them the dial and you set hard set points in here, it can't go beyond what that is. So if I come in here and I literally say
55, I want 55.
I'm trying. I don't know if it'll turn the air conditioner on. But you know, if you hard set like a 73-degree cooling set point, they'll and they can move them around and it's not going to really do anything. So it locks them out, really. I mean, that's, so they don't know that.
They'll figure it out in a day.
Yeah, they might. If it's a zoning system, it might take them a while, but you just tell them, oh yeah, you can turn it up or down. Now one thing with this, like I just turned this one all the way down. I'll make sure I'm on the right one here. So what we do, like right now, this says that the default heating set point is 59.5 degrees. However, if I go back to the controller itself, I think these are actually unoccupied because it's, let me do something real quick.
So that'll let the heat go to that temperature in the middle of the night.
Yeah, let me do something real quick here. I think I have this set to shut off to be unoccupied at like 6 o'clock. So what it's doing is it's unoccupied.
did it on Sunday.
I know, I gotta,
Oh, you're getting old.
yeah. So you can set up like one schedule and paste it to multiples. Network controller can do 16 schedules, 4 on-off times per day. And then you distribute this schedule. I just need to make sure that it's. So now, these are gonna start doing different things because now they're. There we go. So, and on this screen, should say right. So now, down here, if you look at it here, it's saying it's 71 and 73, but if I click on this to go inside of it, so you get a call from the customer, they're like, man, it's just, like even if they could change this, they're like, it's just so cold in here or whatever. It tells you that it's 59 degrees because that's basically telling you where what the position of this is. So you'll be able to see whether it's this one or this one. If they change it, this is kind of the tattletale to say that's what they've got it set to.
Oh, okay.
So even though we set it at 71 and they've dialed it all the way down, what I'm trying to show you is that it locks it out. And then, like I said,
So it just shows you what the current set point is, it's not gonna have.
It shows you what they want it to be, not,
yeah, exactly.
but it's limited to 71.
Correct, yep, absolutely. And like I said, these are swappable, so a lot of times in the building, you'll see people will have this style. And this allows you to just look at it without even getting a laptop or anything out. You can actually see what the controller is and be like, yeah, it's hot in here, no, it's not hot.
So basically, instead of using the computer or whatever, you could just use the interface on.
If it's a larger size project, like I have a buddy that's doing a job over in Indianapolis, it's a 4-story building, a bunch of water source heat pumps. They just bought a couple of extra and threw them in the mechanical room and put them in the panel. So then when they go into the building and someone calls for a service call, they just go up to the unit and just plug it in on the wall, whatever one, and then they can see what because really okay, if I get a call, right, it's hot in here, okay, I take this, okay, yeah, it's a little warm, but it's close to the set point, and if I can see the inputs and outputs and you got fan status and discharge air, if I'm calling for the compressor to run and I see that my fan's running, like if I'm calling, it'll tell you fan start stop is on, it'll show you fan status is true, then it says like the compressor's running and you see like you've got 50-degree air, like what do I need to do now? But if you go to it,
See where the tape is on the diffusers.
that's exactly.
Or the magazine.
But no, that's another one. So that's like a starting point. If you're like, there's really not, because
what's the pros and cons of that versus the tablet?
so the tablet has more features that you can set up and do configuration screens and things in the mechanical room. So if you wanted to change these, you cannot change these from this.
That's through the, you can
That's
do it
for
on
just
the
a quick
tablet.
look,
This is sort of a quick look kind of thing. I wanna go.
or if you're too lazy to get everything set up.
It's that, or sometimes it's just sometimes it's the pageantry of the service call is what
It's
I
an
call
in
it,
and out.
right? It's the pageantry, right? I walk in, you telling me you're upset, you're hot, I don't know. There's lots of reasons you could be hot. I don't know, maybe you had too much to eat at lunch, I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Before you even start, I'm telling you, I'm not paying for this.
Right, yeah. So it's kind of one of those things where you walk in and it's like, oh, okay. And you look at it and you're like, well, it looks, I mean, I can see so they see you doing something, right? Because how many times, I'm not saying you should build your business around one.
If you
It's
let
a-
them watch,
it's a-
you're teaching them. They're gonna do
Well-
the same thing, they're gonna unplug that, they're gonna plug that
You have to
one
be
on.
careful. That's why I say you can't build your business around exactly what I'm saying. But if they see you in and out of the space doing something, the perception is, whether this is wrong or right, but you did something. It's true. Sometimes it's more it's human psychology than anything. But that's the benefit of the T1000, is that you could, or if you have one in your bag or whatever, you could just plug it in and you're gonna be able to see at a glance. If it's like a VAV controller, you'd be able to see, hey, there's no airflow to this VAV. You know, it says the damper's open, but there's zero airflow. It's just a quick, like I can go into the space and do it, or if you,
It's gonna do it on my phone, I can do that
If
same
they-
thing on my phone.
if they have the cloud, yes. Yeah, if they have the cloud, yeah. Some people are, the big fat C word, they're cheap. You can,
It's not always that, some places are worried that you're gonna be able to, they won't allow any
Give you the
outside.
Wi-Fi.
they
They won't
won't,
allow any in their building because of all the
Correct.
stuff that went on starting back at Y2K.
Yeah.
Like banks are like that.
Yep.
You know, they will not let any outside line in, even if it's just hooked up to a thermostat that does their air conditioner, because they're afraid you're gonna be able to rob the vault from your
Right.
phone or something.
Yep. And, you know, one of the things that can be done, for the sake of time, I didn't go through it tonight. I have a PowerPoint that goes through all these different things, but you can actually buy a rooftop controller. So if you have like 5 zones and a rooftop, and they're telling you that, you know, Adam's probably earmuffs, you probably don't want to hear this. But if they're not gonna let you get outside internet, you could put a rooftop controller in 5 zones and put a schedule in the rooftop controller without the network controller, if you had to.
So it's standalone.
Well, it's kind of standalone. If you go to the job and you don't have a PL485 BT, you ain't gonna see nothing. So you can do it, but it's kind of like,
Yeah, you're not.
So
if you don't have,
Set it up when you do have internet, then take it, install it, and then.
It's like when we go to Robinson, you don't have Wi-Fi.
right.
With the price of fuel, you know, the fuel charge, that alone will pay for your Wi-Fi.
Well, so that's something, yeah, that's a sales tactic that I use. The other thing that I use is I've asked people in the past, like, so why don't you get your service bills out for the past 5 years, and let's look at how many calls you had when someone came and it was something as simple as a set point that they probably could have changed from their phone. And I just about guarantee you that what you've spent in the past 5 years probably would pay at least close, at least 50% of what it would cost to put it in. And I'll touch on that towards the end. There are some different sales strategies to use, like building them into preventative maintenance agreements. When you talk about capital projects versus,
Retrofit.
no, there's 2 types of budgets.
Repairs.
Yeah, there's operations budget and capital.
Right.
If you're doing a preventative maintenance agreement, if you go into a building, I'll just do this now, get out of the way, because it's right on my mind. If you go into a building and you're talking to someone, right, and you're trying to sell them a preventative maintenance agreement, not that you guys are sales guys, there's no sales guys here? Okay. Yeah, you're typically,
Everybody.
it's like changing oil, right? How many places can you go get the oil change in your truck today?
Everywhere.
That's right. So if everybody and their brother is like, hey, we do clean coils and change filters, what makes you different than the next guy? What makes you different?
Personality.
But what are you gonna do for my business? Like how is that better? Right? It is personality, it is reliability, but most of them are too silly to know like how many bad people there are out there, right? So what I always tell people when they start thinking about this is you say, hey, look, if you had the ability to remotely look at your site and I had the ability to remotely look at your site, is that something you'd be interested in? And usually the answer is gonna be yes, right? And then you say, okay, unfortunately what you have in here now is not that way. Now what we're suggesting is we could do a preventative maintenance agreement, it's a 3-year deal. The first year would include putting the PROLON system in up front, which would be the first year will be expensive, and then years 2 and 3 will be a little bit less. But now, when you need something, I can be on my phone as long as you give me outbound internet access, and I can look at your building now without even showing up. And what it does is what you're trying to do from a business standpoint, not to make this a business thing too much, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a better relationship with your customer. That's how you're making yourself different, and that's the personality thing, right?
That's true of all sales.
Because if you
You
care,
form that personal relationship,
right,
once you form it,
right,
you gotta
and-
really, you gotta screw up even more to break it.
right, because now, what's the number one issue? You show up to a call, there's a control system that you cannot get into, there's gonna be 2 bills. You're gonna have to call whoever put that system in, right? You're gonna have to, it's inevitable.
All on you.
And then what? They're like, well, I called you because you're supposed to be the expert. Why are you sending me a bill when they had to come do the work? I gotta pay them and I gotta pay you? It's because they don't understand. And so what I tell people is it's when you think about PROLON, it doesn't fit everywhere. But you have to think about it. Yeah, the light commercial, and you think about it as, it's not, you're trying to solve a mechanical problem that you can control, right? Because like if you go buy a Wi-Fi stat, yeah, you can get it online, but can you change when the compressors start and stop on staging? No. You typically can't see discharge air. I mean, maybe if you buy a high-end one, you can see discharge air and fan status. But a lot of those don't have economizer controller built into them. So there's a lot of features that we have built into them that allows you to see everything and allows you to configure everything. So and it goes back to what I started with. The facilities don't have facilities guys that know where everything's at anymore. They're hiring mechanicals and being like, well, here, we're just gonna pay you. You tell us what we need, you're the expert, and then you tell
You're
them.
lucky if they know where the breakers are at downstairs.
Yeah. I think one of the cool ones that we just had was, Tom and his team put a VAV system in a longtime client, and they had a lot of problems with temperature and humidity, and we decided to go with PROLON. It wasn't until later down the project we found out about the humidity issue. All we had to do was add a couple of humidity sensors to the PROLON system, because it has dehumidification added to it. And it's been dehumidifying the building. I mean, I talked to Mike today and not one complained about humidity, and it's.
Oh yeah, the past 2 days. If there was gonna be a humidity problem, it would show it said the past 2 days. It's really brutal. So, and what this is, so we give you some options if you wanna change how far out your PI and stuff is. We do cover all that really in depth in the class, and then we have like a hard limit on unoccupied. So this is kind of a set point piece. I know that I saw a shiny object and a squirrel and I went down a hole, but that's kind of the configuration for the temperature. When we get into the damper, this controller can also be used for multi-zone. So you're just gonna select what it is. You can do clockwise, counterclockwise. In an unoccupied mode, you can tell it what you want it to do. If it opens, closes. Something else that the software does is you can hover over it and it'll give you a brief description. We've got the changeover piece basically saying, hey, what the temperature is with the air coming down the duct, when I'm gonna allow the damper to open or close based on what my space temperature is compared to what the temperature in the duct is, obviously. Right, if I need cooling, is it?
I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
0.9, is that like the default setting?
Yeah, it's still, yeah. There are a lot of people who use our default. Do most of the, some people change them.
Some.
I've run into a few actuators that don't have stops. Can you change the stroke on those?
So how you change the stroke on the actuator,
Or the timing?
not the timing. Are they external actuators
Yes, they're outside the duct.
on a C1050?
I don't know.
No, they've only bought VC 2000.
Okay. How the VC2000 works, there should be stops on all of them. If they don't have stops, you need to call Cochran Supply because they should have stops.
You're
So-
talking about economizer dampers?
I'm talking about, never mind, I was thinking somebody else's actuator, not.
Okay, because these are actually Belimo actuators with our controller on top of them.
Yeah, they have stops.
But I don't know how many, do you guys have very many of the old school 45-degree carrier?
Yes.
45 degree? Okay,
That's what sometimes messes you up.
okay, so let's talk about those since you guys have them in this market. These have stops, okay? Belimo has a process called adaption that we utilize. So if you put this in, 0 to 45 is 0 to 100%, 45 to 90 is 100 to 0. You set the stops, and there's two ways to do it. You can either cycle power, or you can do a reset. And the damper goes into this mode called reinitialization. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna stroke all the way one way, it's gonna stroke all the way the other way, and wherever the hard stops are at, it's gonna reset its scale. So in that instance, 45 degrees would be 100% open. So for example, with that damper, if this controller did that and we set a 50% output, it would be 22.5 degrees open. Does that make sense? So that's what the hard stops are for, and that's what the adaptation process is, so that the controller knows. Because what it does is it gives us like a little eddy current feedback. So on this, if you come in, it does have a clutch on the front of it. If you push the clutch and you're like, yeah man, get that thing wide open, get some air, and then you forget to like, well, the damper will be lost. Like once you manually like open the clutch,
You need to power it down.
power it down, you can either do it right here at the,
Can't you just re-engage the clutch?
Yeah, but it doesn't know.
it doesn't know where it's at, because how we do it is it goes through this process every time that it starts. So that's how when we
Every
show
time
a
the power
value,
goes out, every time
yeah,
you unplug it.
yeah. So every time it powers up, it drives open and it drives closed, and it knows like it's 90 degrees or it's 45 degrees, and what it does is it resets the scale. So 0% open, 100%. And then if you move it, even if it's 0 to 45 and you move it, it still knows 0 to 45, but now it doesn't know, because what it does is it sends it a command and it kind of follows its own type
So,
thing. It
so
gives
if
it
you've got
feedback.
one that poor duct design, whatever, it's too much flow noise, you could change that with the stops, power it down and make it 0 to 22%. So it only goes a quarter open for full open.
So
We did that for noise.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so in
Yeah.
that, in that case, do you need to use a
Such
stop?
a nice
If you
complaint
can just
over
Well-
set the swing is in the program.
So you can change
Branding,
the
I pushed
maximum
out.
damper limit and the minimum damper
We did
limit
all those.
inside
Oh,
the
once
software.
it's ranged, you can still
Yes.
limit it.
Brandon was.
Yes.
Flow noise reasons,
So,
whatever.
yeah, if it sounds like
Because it's so fucking.
you know, it's like if it sounds like it's, you know, like maybe you have a big,
Papers flying everywhere.
yeah, if you got like a
The
big.
classic is the phone conference and the air conditioning comes on and nobody else can participate in the meeting because that guy's phone's picking up the phone.
Right. Exactly. So you can set that maximum to how far open it will go. Cause I know too, you get those whistling, I don't, you guys don't have any of those type of, but you know what I'm saying.
I told the maintenance.
They may have a big box and they may have like 2 6-inch drops and it's trying to push a whole bunch. Now in a VVT, theoretically, depending on what you set your duct pressure to, you know, but yes, just set it and then the lady will stop saying it sounds like a Mack truck's coming through. I mean, if somebody's like, oh, it's a zone system, I want a 1.5 inch.
It sounds cold in
Yeah,
here.
it sounds cold. I love it. The other thing that we do that's a bit unique, we have a thing called movement control. I just keep thinking of my 3 women, one hot, one's cold, and one thinks both of them are crazy. We do a thing called movement control. So what we try to do to extend the life of the product is we don't move the damper every like 0.5% or 1%. By default, we're gonna look for a request of 10% movement before we're gonna stroke the damper. So like if you're at 20% and it's calling and it's like 21, 22, 23, we're gonna wait till it gets to 30 and then we're gonna go ahead and stroke it. The other thing that we try to do, especially from a VVT standpoint, is we're trying to avoid oscillation. I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen a system where it's just constantly hunting. So, because in a VVT and VAV, anytime you do anything, especially the bigger the system is, the more pronounced it can be. So every time you're opening and closing dampers, if you're moving them every like 0.5%, 1%, and they're just constantly hunting, you're going to be constantly changing the pressure in your duct. Well, whether it's a bypass or a VFD, what's it going to do? It's going to adjust. So as you open or close dampers, you're going to drop pressure in the ductwork, and the VFD or the bypass is going to respond accordingly to try to maintain whatever that pressure set point is.
So if you have PI, wouldn't I take care of it? a little bit?
A little bit, yes,
Proportional interval, yeah.
yeah. Sometimes what happens though, the answer is yes, it should, but sometimes people set real aggressive and then they're always hunting.
PI loop.
Yeah, yeah, it's proportional interval. So I can get into how proportional interval works.
No, you can't do that until you do PID.
Yeah, I don't use D in air conditioning. It's,
D's more industrial.
Yeah, D's,
D's very fine control.
yeah. So we typically, because we cater to mechanical contractors, mechanical service contractors, and typically, that small buildings, a lot of people don't have experience setting all that stuff up and knowing like what to look for. So we try to extend the life of the equipment by not constantly stroking the actuator, as well as trying to keep the oscillation. Yes, and really, because my background is really large buildings. Like the largest controls project I ever did was $1.5 million, was building automation only. And so you get jobs with 60 VAVs off of an air handler, and then they're all hunting, and then your pressure is constantly hunting, and then
You drive speeding up slow.
yeah. So you can change some different things here. If you don't want that ventilation mode to be 100%, you can change it. We talked about the outputs. You can use some different, different function, duct heater, radiant floor heater. Maybe if you've got a fan powered box. I think I always set this one up where I say it's a fan powered box. Oh, no, not series, parallel. And this is just when it's gonna turn on and off. We use, however many are familiar with the term hysteric relay or hysteresis. So that's essentially what it is. So we have a set point. Set point is 30. The differential is from here to here. So essentially this is in half. So we would turn on at 40% heating demand and turn off at 20% heating demand. But those are all variables that are available to you. Typically, do you get very many calls, Adam, to adjust those? I know I haven't taken very many calls.
No, honestly, most of the time, a lot of these settings are good. There's just a couple that I changed, like the PI settings and temperature. I changed that from like 15 to 30.
Yeah.
That's one thing customers don't understand. Every temperature controller has to have that hysteresis in it.
Right.
Your thermostat may stay 70 all the time, but it's not turning your air conditioner on and off at 70.0.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not showing on the screen, but it's either changing it,
Right.
0.2, 0.4 off of there.
So, a couple other things on the zone, and then I'm gonna move on to the rooftop controller. So we can set this up here like it's a duct heater. It's got an interlock here, so if it sees 122 degrees coming from the rooftop like W1's calling, it's like boom, no, don't run the duct heater for the zone. I'm not trying to reheat 122 degree air. I already got 122. Yep. I don't know how it is here.
Before you leave this, Tony, can you switch it to multi-zone too, just to show Tom, because we ended up looking at a multi-zone the other day.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the other place, Steve Martin's place.
Where?
Steve Martin.
Oh, so.
So it'll change here, and then you've got some options for changing how you want the.
Like hot, cold.
Cold bed.
Oh, God.
Blending air.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely hot deck, cold deck.
Love these systems.
They're comfortable.
They are.
We had a building with 6 multi-zone rooftops that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
There's 7, 8, 10 zones each. Old season's 4 units. The things are in incredible condition. The Honeywell controllers are failing. And, what were those?
Season's 4 like Atlanta, right? They're like out of the Georgia area somewhere.
Yeah. What was that? 7400s?
Yeah, it was like
7541,
multi-
something like that, the
Or the
multi-zone.
W973.
Yeah.
Oh, the gray
Actual-
box.
So
Yeah,
it's-
looks like
it's
they
got the
They
come
were
with
load-
obsolete in
control.
1992.
The
Yeah.
load management box.
But this would be great for that, cause
Yeah.
he has to go up to the roof every time just to change the temperature for a zone, cause all the zone sensors are up in the unit.
So they're all
Wow.
labeled
Set
really
points. So every time he's gotta go up to the roof to set a set point.
That is pretty wild. So the other thing that a lot of people ask us about, voting. So I'll keep my government comment to myself.
Let me ask you,
PROLON.
Tony,
Mail
before you
in.
go any further, how many dead people?
Yeah, how many dead zones get the vote?
That's where we got the government beat. No dead zone can vote at PROLON. If you're offline, you can't vote. So we have a couple of things that we can do. We typically, by default, use a global code, and you can weight the global code, and you can weight it more or less. And I don't know that there's a limitation. So if you want one zone to have like 10 votes, you probably could put 10 in here. This is a unique scenario. I just want to tell you what it is. We won't go too deep into it. If you have some VVT zones that are on the perimeter of a building, and you give those zones like baseboard heat, and you didn't want those zones to send their heating demand back to the rooftop, you only wanted the core zones to call for heat, we could set this up in a way where we could give them the right to vote for cooling, but not the right to vote for heating. And then we could give the core zones the right to vote for heating and cooling. That's what this is for. If you need to do it, most of the time you're gonna do this, and that's it.
How do you separate the heating and cooling, by group?
Yeah, we have to create groups. Usually we tell people create a spread, we usually help them create a spreadsheet and identify the zones. And then we create, in the rooftop, we create a group number, and then we give it a weight. So if I create a group 1 and a group 2, and say like 1 and 0, just remember that, keep that thought real quick. We set this, we saved it. In the rooftop controller, oops, wrong one. In the rooftop controller, this is where we would say like 1 and 2. So if this one, if I said no, I don't want it to vote for heat, it would be 0. But if I wanted to vote for cooling, because I use group code 2, it would be allowed. It would be allowed to a part of the calculation for cooling, but it won't be included because I created group code 1 here.
Group code 1's for heating only, 2 for
Well,
cooling only.
That's because how I associated them.
Right, but you can make them either or.
Yeah, you can change it. Sometimes there's too many options, but there are lots of options. But in this one, we're just showing like, here's a group 2. I gave it a vote. So in this scenario, this box would, over here, because we used 1, this is not gonna be a part of the vote. Over here, it would be allowed to vote. It lives in the right district here. It doesn't live in the right district here. It's just trying to do absentee ballot over here.
Yeah.
Always remember to apply it and save it.
Apply it and save it, yes.
What's that, Brian?
Apply and save, because otherwise you're shit out of luck. You
Apply
do
and
it
save
again.
often. The other thing that you can do, if you wanted to, if you have like 30 of these to do, you could save this as a template. And now, let's just say I came in here and this was scratch, right? Right, now I can come up here, I would say, hey, I wanna apply a template. Because I'm offline, I'm gonna look for a VAV, I'm gonna look at my local files. I'm gonna call it this, say, okay. and I wanna apply it to this one, oh, it keeps changing again. Probably didn't save,
Line safe.
yeah.
What was that, Brian?
Apply and save.
Yeah, you gotta apply and save a lot. So now what it did is it loaded the configuration in, and he's absolutely right. I wanna make sure that so.
Going back.
I don't know why it keeps doing that.
Histories.
Well, it usually, well, the last training thing I did, I messed around and did some stuff and sometimes I reprogram these controllers to show people things, and then when I do that, sometimes. Oh, probably because it wasn't named right one when I did the template. So, the VAB controller, everything is exactly the same with the exception of, oh, there was something I did miss. If you need to calibrate the room temperatures or discharge for the set point, you can.
Yeah.
The big difference in the VAB is you need to put in what the CFM set points are, the box size, the K factor. If you don't know, we actually have an auto calibrate process that you can do with the balancer. Hit it, it's gonna drive open, they're gonna read all the diffusers. So, how many of you guys done VABs before? Alright. They use the word test and balance, it drives me nuts. It's calibrate, and then they need to go manually balance all of the manual dampers to each diffuser. So a lot of times the portion that the control guy is involved with is the calibration. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to verify that the VAB box is reading what the balancer read at each of the diffusers. So the balancer is going to go read all the diffusers, give you a number, and we need to calibrate to make sure that that's that. And they may say, put it to your high CFM, they'll go read it. Yeah, that's the calibration, or that's the test part. The balance part is really them going back to each of the manual dampers. You know, if it says there's 4 diffusers and it should be 100 CFM in each one, and these two have 50 and those two have 150, well, yeah, we've got the right CFM total, but not here, and that have nothing to do with me. We've already read that, okay, the PROLON system's reading 400 CFM, I got 400 CFM. Their job is then to go back and balance the diffusers. So I don't know.
What if they're short-staffed and then
They'll probably just skip it, dude, to be honest with you, and then you guys will get the call back. How many of you have ever done test and balance?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It is kind of important a little bit, but this is the calibration piece. On big jobs you see this more, but that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to verify that what the balancer's reading is what the controller reads, and the T1000 can be used, and there's a set of instructions for when they're doing the VAB boxes. The other thing that I wanted to touch on real quick.
Tony, how is it calculating CFM?
What's that?
How is it calculating CFM, a grid?
So essentially, it's got pickup, and it's actually basically just converting airflow,
Okay.
velocity pressure to. So if you have a really good balancer, they should be able to read, and they should be able to give you a K factor. I've worked with really good balancers, and then I've worked with some turds. And if you work with guys that don't really know very well, it's probably better to go through the other step where we run it to high and they read it. But I've worked with guys that'll say, put this K factor in, and I'll put the K factor in, and they'll be like, boom, spot on, got it. But there's other guys that are like, well, I don't know how to calculate the K factor. That's why we put the auto calibrate in, where it'll drive to 100% open. They read it, we write what the CFM is, and then I think it drives to 20% open, they read it, we put the value in, and then it generates a K factor internally. But something to know, because it's a good question you asked that, because out of the box, sometimes what people get concerned about that never worked a lot with VAV, and like I said, our focus is HVAC mechanical service contractors. Because it is velocity pressure and we're converting it to CFM. If you leave this as an 8-inch box default out of the box until someone else can get to it to change the settings, the box is still gonna try to control, right? It's gonna see cooling demand, it's gonna try to open the damper, it's just gonna be more air, but essentially, you have to think of it like this. Velocity pressure differential is velocity pressure differential. The velocity pressure across it is, what changes is the amount of air based on how big the ductwork is, right? So if I have like a half an inch is a half an inch, it doesn't matter. It's just a half an inch at a 16-inch box is a lot more air than an 8-inch box. So what this is still gonna try to do is it's still gonna try to modulate to maintain a CFM set point. It's just what it thinks the CFM is gonna be a lot smaller. Yes?
What would be typical low and high K factor numbers, 200, 400, or?
You typically, this is actually 2.39. Typically, the manufacturer of the box has that information. So if you bought a VAV box from someone, you typically can get that K factor information. Each manufacturer is a little bit different.
So ballpark 1 to 4, 2 to 3.
And there's two different ways they do it a lot of times. So you'll see they have amplification in here, but if you drop that down, there's
Yeah.
also the actual like CFM, which is the CFM of the box at 1 inch of static.
Yeah.
We had to go by that.
Yeah.
Cause they were all
It depends on the manufacturer, on what they give you. I think Titus, I think Titus gives you this number, but I think they'll give you the other one too. I can't remember.
Just looked up the K factor for an 8-inch box for somebody, and it was 800 something. So that's a pretty good guess that PROLON's got in there for 8 inches.
Yeah, they're all very close. And to be honest with you, most of the time, I think it's plus or minus 5% when the balance guys go in anyways. So we get them pretty close. It's close enough to get air in there to keep them from complaining until you can get to it. And usually once you put them in, they're like, well, you can't come back because you got everybody in the office now. So just call us when they're uncomfortable.
You come back, but
Yeah,
you gotta move these 4 desks. To
Yeah.
the box.
Oh, we didn't know you needed to do
And the
that.
fish tank. You know,
Yeah, we didn't know, we already put up the
Cottage.
modular furniture.
And the server rack.
Do all the doorways.
Yeah.
And we decided to put some walls in.
Yeah.
So the boxes we sell, the largest at 22 inches has 8,700 as the K factor, and the smallest at 4 inches is 248.
Does it give you a decimal, like a 2, like a 1.8, or they
They
just give you the
factor? No, I have both, yeah, so the amplification factor is 1.6 on 4 inch and 2.6 on the 22 inch.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, once again, with rooftop unit, it's very similar. We got the same thing. Edit display, you're gonna see very consistent things here. Fan, you got your options. Do I want it automatic? Do I want it on? You can determine in an unoccupied period, like at what heating demand or cooling demand, do I wanna turn the fan on? We've got a minimum cycle time. Maybe on an M2000, which is what I have here, maybe you want to use digital output 5 to do a powered exhaust. Maybe you want to do it on occupancy. Maybe you want to do powered exhaust based on your economizer position. So you could start the digital output based on what the economizer output is so that it will start a fan. Same thing with using differential in this scenario, 45% open, power exhaust is going to start, 25, power exhaust is going to shut off. It's going to drive open to 45%, kick on. It's going to have to swing down below 25 before it's going to turn off. And we just use that same standard hysteric relay logic. Now, when you do choose that, if you wanted to use the digital output for W2, you wouldn't be able to, and it's going to tell you that. So I'm just going to disable it for now.
Is there a CO2 option on it?
There is a CO2 option under damper. I'll get to that one in just 1 second. So earlier I was talking about being able to make changes. So in your mechanical cooling, if you want to run it like a standard Y1, Y2, using the cooling demand, you could do that. Or let's say you had a DX that's more of a VAV, you could actually say, I want to try to control to a supply air temperature set point. And what this thing's gonna do is it's gonna do like a discharge air set point reset. So if there's no cooling demand, maybe I'm gonna try to maintain 65. And maybe if I've got a high cooling demand, I'm gonna try to maintain 50. And it's gonna stage Y1 and Y2 on and off accordingly to try to maintain that. You can also say, well, maybe I wanna do a fixed discharge air set point, and it'll try to maintain a fixed. You can reset the discharge air based on the outside air temperature. Or you can look at the return air temperature and change it. So there's a lot of options in here. When you go this route, it's trying to maintain discharge, so it's gonna stage the units on and off. But let's say, for example, we don't wanna do that. Let's just say we're gonna do a classic VVT. Even if this was a constant volume unit, and we still use that hysteric relay for turning the outputs on and off. So sometimes I've heard scenarios where guys say, oh man, there's a really small unit, and because it's small, if I let it swing out that far, I'll lose the space. So in that instance, they're gonna say, hey, when I get just a little bit of a cooling demand, I'm gonna start the compressor. Or they'll say, hey, when stage 2 kicks on, it's kicking on too early and it's way overcooling the space. What we're giving you is we're giving you the freedom and the flexibility to move when you start those stages. So if you, maybe stage 1 is 5 tons, and maybe I'm gonna be totally wrong on this, but maybe stage 2 is 10 tons. Maybe you have some unique configuration, or stage 1 is
5, 10, 15, 3 stages.
Yeah.
You do 3 stages?
Well, that's what I was
Yeah.
I was getting ready to ask, so you got an RTU that's, say 2-stage, but now I got a heat coil off of a boiler that's running perimeter, but then I got a coil in, so it's not really cold enough to where I need to put this on while I'm running this. Does it have the option to do, 3 heat, 2 cool?
We can
Or
do
2 different units?
I think we can do 2 heat.
I know that was something we had kind of broached, but never really focused on.
Trying to run a reheat.
Yeah, we can do
Yeah.
3
Well,
heat.
with air conditioning to dehumidify.
Preheat, too cool.
Yeah.
They would
Apply safe. To wait that second stage longer to give you some
We
more
are de-
dehumidification.
There are some new applications for this coming out. Can't tell you when, because
I wasn't
We're
sure, but I
debating.
know it wasn't there.
so if you're doing hot gas, we don't have modulating hot gas reheat. It's open or closed hot gas reheat. So if you said to me, I want to do dehumidification, right? And you can set up stages 1 and stages 2. You're going to do this. If you come in here to heating, and you set this up to hot gas reheat, that output's going to kick on, but it's not modulated. It's just going to open.
It's either on or off, and that's it.
Yeah, on the hot gas, yep. So in this instance, you'd have W1, W2, but you'd also have a hot gas reheat. But you could still do, like, once we go beyond 2 stages of cooling, you need 1 of 2 things. You either need a little demux or a flex IO controller. What I was gonna tell you with this, what we're getting, they're adding some things to this controller. They're gonna add up to 8 stages of cooling. They're also gonna add vernier compressor control. How many of you guys have ever seen that? How many of you ever heard of that?
Did you say Vernier?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Variable.
It's a variable. So like, for example, you have one compressor that can modulate. I don't know the correct terms here because I'm an electrician first, but I understand the concept because I've done big chiller plants. So the concept is I take my first stage to 100%. Once it gets to 100%, I'm gonna drop the variable out. I'm just gonna start that next one. And then as my demand goes up, and then I'm gonna modulate this one. And then once I get to that.
So when the second stage kicks in, it'll drop back down to 20 on the first,
Right.
then ramp up, and then when
Yeah.
it brings the third one on, it brings it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the old carrier rack system from the
Yep.
50s. did that.
Yeah, so we've had some requests
Some
for
box
that.
covers too.
Yeah.
Then there's some fan stuff and advanced rooftop controller that people have asked for, where they're gonna be able to do, like, I don't know if you've ever seen it much in the Midwest, but like fan speed drops.
Yeah.
to 40. So.
Get a colder coil.
Well, no, what they're asking now in like Texas and places like that, if there's no call for heating or cooling, they want the fan to drop to 40%. So like if there's no Y1 or
For
W1.
ventilation.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they just
Just
drop
like
it.
your residential units.
Yeah, so this is where you can change all that. Yeah, that's all your heating and cooling stuff. Your duct static pressure setup is here. Your damper, so we can do economizer. You can enable the economizer, you can control it different ways, mixed air. And then CO2 is gonna be in the return air. So it's a 4 to 20 milliamp signal, and then you're gonna, modulate, open or close. You can limit the damper, and then you can limit it to a temperature. And what it does, you got the dehumidification we talked about. Priority, it's gonna look at outside air to determine if the unit is gonna take heating demands first or cooling demands, so that it will switch over based on outside air temperature. The other thing that we have in here are limits. So sometimes we put these in so that the equipment doesn't trip out on its own. So if the discharge air gets too high, we're gonna shut the heat off. The discharge air gets too low, we're gonna shut the cooling off. If the outside air temperature is below a certain temperature, don't try to run the compressors even if it's calling for them to run. Or if the outside air temperature is too high, don't fire off W1 or W2. It's designed to give you some flexibility.
Like a warm weather shutdown, and it's got histories that you can set in it, or? Is
It's usually like 3.6 degrees, but you can choose what the temperature is. So like here it says that the outdoor air temperature gets more than 86 degrees, and it's got a 3.6 degree
I ran into
differential.
that with, you brought up T775s earlier, with their warm weather shutdown. You can pick the set point, you can read that book all day long, and it doesn't tell you what the hysteresis is on that outdoor set point.
Yeah, ours is
I called the supplier, he had to call the tech guys who built them.
Yeah.
It's 3 degrees.
Yeah, ours is 3.6. Same with the cooling, and then if you have some other things that you need to do, like if you wanted to override all the zone dampers, so I'm gonna finish on this and then I'll leave for any questions. Other guy called me tech support. He says, "Man, I'm in Atlanta, Tony." This is of course, like February. I'm like, it's cold because I live in Indiana. He's like, "Oh, it's a hot day down here in Atlanta." I said, "Well, it's hot. It's so hot in the building." And I said, "Well, what's wrong, man?" He said, "I don't think your PROLON controls are working." I said, "Well, let me see if I can help you figure it out." He said, "All right." So I logged in, and like all the spaces were hot. Duct pressure was pretty high. I'm like, man, this just looks really weird. The unit would run cooling a little bit, and then it would, shut off. So I go into this screen, and I always do with dampers. Anything that modulates, I do 25, 50, 75, 100, 75, 55, 20, 75, 50, 25, and 0. To make sure that it's actually its true position. Luckily, I had experience with carrier dampers. I got to 25%, duct pressure started going down. Man,
50%?
50% duct pressure way down. 75% duct pressure went up.
This is very common.
100% duct pressure went way up. So I said, all right, here's what we're gonna do,
It's
man.
wide shut.
I said, I'm gonna override the zone dampers for you at like 50% to get some cooling. I said, but you need to get up there and look at them. I said, I bet this was a whole carrier system. Man, you smart, Tony. How'd you know that? You're not even down here Atlanta with me. I said, trust me, I know. I know, man. I already know. I said, but what I need you to do now is I need you to go to your bypass damper. So something that I didn't show you guys is that from the graphic, you can right-click on an object and you can override it. So I did the same thing with this bypass damper. Here it's gonna flash at us. I overrode it, 25%, duct pressure didn't change. 100% didn't change. I said, man, are those things even hooked up? He said, man, Tony, how'd you know that's not working? I said, your duct pressure's not changing, man. So I said, look, man, the PROLON system's fine. I said, what's not fine are all your zone dampers. You're gonna need to get up there. You need to set them. You need to set the stops. You need to cycle power. You need to get your bypass damper hooked up the right way, and then go back and test it. So even though it's not a big complicated system, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. You can override the fan on and off from here. In the network controller, it can do trends, it can do alarms. So for example, if you wanted to say my unit's occupied, fan start stop is on, but fan status is off, I want an alarm, you can do that. There's a lot of different things to do.
You do dirty filter alarms too with the differential pressure sensor.
Yeah.
You get alarms when the filters are starting to get clogged.
Yeah, I did have some refrigeration guys ask me about our Flex IO controller. So you can actually take this and put another controller under it, and what he wanted to do was monitor low pressure and high pressure. So what we did on the Flex is we basically took like a relay and wired it as an input. So when there was power to the compressor, we powered a relay that closed.
Oh, just a dry contact, so.
Yep.
So he can modulate between his two pressures for.
Well, what we did is he had two outputs. He wanted two lights. He wanted a high pressure light and a low pressure light. So what we did, if the compressor was not being called to run, the compressor had to be calling to run, and the pressure had to be above this, or the pressure had to be below this, and then we would turn on two outputs. And then we alarmed those two outputs. But for whatever reason, I don't know why he was so adamant, but that's what we did. So we just looked at the status. Is the compressor being commanded to run? Yes. And is the pressure above this? No, no alarm. Is it above this? Yes, there's an alarm. Is it below this? No. If the compressor wasn't being commanded to run, like if somebody shut the unit off or something, then the controller wouldn't alarm.
That tells him, hey, controls or.
Couldn't you put some transducers on AIs and give you the actual pressures?
That's what we did. So what he actually did.
I mean, so you could actually see the pressures rather than any
Correct.
alarms, yeah.
He can still have his alarm relays
Yeah.
controlled with lights if you're in the room,
Yes.
but he can log in remotely and see exactly what's pressure.
He can see what the pressure is, yes, yes, yep, absolutely. And that's what it was, I don't know exactly.
The price goes way up when you go from an on-off pressure switch to a transducer and a.
Yeah, well, that's what he wanted to do. So basically, anything that's got a 0 to 5 volt output, and you're gonna know what the pressure range is from the manufacturer. We just selected a 0 to 5 volts, and whatever the manufacturer tells us the scale is, we just plug the scale into the controller for high and low. So we can save this project and all that. It's 7:15. You guys have been here for a while. I wanted to leave a little bit of room for very specific questions. I like to talk and teach, so I could go all night, but I don't think that's an option. So are there any things that you saw that I didn't answer that you wanted to ask me about before you guys peel out of here tonight, or any?
Why is the tablet keep freezing up?
Yeah, we've never gotten.
There's a job we've got, that new system has a tablet.
Yeah,
and
so
it's
they
isolated.
They asked me about that, and that one I sent off to, I already sent a request in to the tech guys asking them why.
That's a long time.
So I don't know.
I mean, it just locks up, but I mean, it's weird, cause it, you know, it's just a two-story, first story will run fine, second story doesn't, but then, I mean, everything just locks.
Yeah, you have to cycle power to it. Yeah, that one I don't have a good answer. Yeah, yeah. that one.
Write his name down.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Or did I do okay?
Is he good?
Tony, so Adam and I were talking,
You would have thought of all my hot air would have went up. Yeah,
Adam and I were talking about, project we talked with Dan about, what was that, a year ago? Maybe about steam resets. Utilize,
We were talking with Dan, it was before you started at PROLON about steam boiler control.
making something work like a steam tech wire.
I'm not familiar with, I'd have to look at how the steam Techmar works.
I can explain that to you, but we didn't know if maybe you heard something, that's all.
Typically, how they do the application there's a huge list of them, and they're working on what they think has the most requests. Unless someone comes to us and says, hey, the fastest way to get it done is to say, I'm gonna buy 50 controllers, and, cause I got 50 of these applications, and that usually moves it to the front of the line.
So just lie.
Well, I was gonna say,
Well-
didn't we say 49? Is that the problem?
Money talks.
Well, it's not, it's hard because everywhere we go, like as we go into the south, like everybody, there's 7 different climate zones in the US, and it's really hard because as we've grown, there's like all these different demands. Like in the south, they want dehumidification by dew point. You get parts of the country like the west, well, they want enthalpy control because they want to do comparative enthalpy. Where I live, you don't do comparative enthalpy here. I had a project in my backyard because I used to do the custom controls. It was a university.
Yeah.
They did comparative enthalpy. What do you think happens when you load a college university gym for a basketball game with a whole bunch of people? Do you think the outdoor air enthalpy is going to be less than the indoor? Oh yeah. Oh, but now we got players slipping and sliding on the basketball. Why? Well, because nobody bothered to look at how much moisture is in the air outside before we brought in all this outside air. Right? We're going to save all this money.
Other than that, you gotta keep the CO2 down anyways. You put
Well,
3,000 people in the gymnasium. After 2 hours, everybody's passing out.
That's what we're actually.
That's why they always play harder in the first quarter.
so enthalpy, typically in the west, because I lived out there, they'll do comparative enthalpy because they'll say that like there's less BTU. They're doing comparative enthalpy from the return temperature to the outdoor because their whole thing is energy. So they'll say that, you know, if it's less outside than it is indoors, then it's cheaper BTU. Like if it's, you know, 1 degree less outside, even though it's not economizer mode, to them, it takes less BTU to cool that down than it does to cool the indoor air, even if you're bringing in greater. And that's more of a West Coast dry, arid, non.
Most of your grocery stores all go off of dew point because it's really the only thing that tells you how much moisture is in the air rather than
Right.
RH doesn't.
Yeah, and so a lot of people, you know, 55 degree dew point, return air, it's time.
Just do dry bulk.
It's time to do, well, the dehumidify, not economizer. Yeah, so, yeah, there's some different ones. Steam, is it substantially different than the way that
Yes.
is it?
Yeah.
Probably because all the safeties.
No, it really isn't.
You
It
can't
doesn't
change
involve,
the
it doesn't involve
temperature
safety.
reset on hot water.
Basically, what it's doing is it's looking at, the easiest way to do it is you put a sensor at the end of the run.
Okay, at the very end?
Yeah.
To tell you when it's on.
And so when you've got steam up, you know it, say you set it for 190 degrees at the condensate drip.
Right.
And now you start a heating cycle. Well, a heating cycle may be 10 minutes based, you know, if it's 50 degrees outside, or it may be, a full hour or 100% when it's 0 outside.
Right.
And Techmar's gotten to the point where they getting to the point.
What's the other one? The other
Crazy.
ones.
Heat timer.
Heat timer.
Yeah.
You can't change the temperature of the fluid, so
Yeah.
you only let the fluid heat for a certain amount of time out of each half hour or
Yeah.
out of each hour.
Like a duty cycle type time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they do it.
But it's based on the outdoor air temperature, and sometimes they weight it with indoor air sensors too. But the key is to have that condensate sensor in there, so when the condensate heats up, that's when the cycle starts.
Okay.
Unless somebody comes along later and puts a Danfoss control
Yeah.
in that radiator, turns it all the way down because he's.
Well, we had someone ask for cold, they want a cold boiler controller as well. And it's like, well, how does that even operate? I'm like, what? They're like, we can't find cold boiler
And
controllers.
in the old fashioned ways, they would control with dampers,
Yeah.
the combustion
Down
air
in Kentucky,
dampers.
actually.
Yeah. So process boiler
I think it's for the University of Kentucky,
for
actually.
heating.
Yeah.
What I tell people is in the old days, they had a guy that had to come in at 3 in the morning, shovel coal into that thing to warm it up. And he wasn't gonna go back down in the basement and shovel until a certain amount of people were complaining.
Yeah.
You know, they probably all had to think, one person always complains.
Well,
The
the big
cool-
one,
It takes 3 strong voters to make me go down there and shovel.
So steam, are you guys seeing that mostly in industrial?
We see it a lot in heating up here.
Old
Is
buildings.
it still?
Yeah, we have a lot of old steam buildings.
The,
Old Midwest Steel City.
Well, I know, like downtown Indianapolis used to have a lot of steam. That
East Lake
city
Drive
steam,
was,
but they.
A lot of schools, a lot of schools, yeah.
Yeah.
670 megawatts.
Yeah, we still have city steams too, but a lot of the buildings downtown have put, heat exchangers in.
Right,
Canal Road steam plant is cold.
yeah. That's the one that I've seen the most of, like, they put heat exchangers in.
You can go to hot water,
Well, city steam.
city steam, but I mean, yeah.
I
got
did a
buildings out of
military
Akron.
installment that was like that. Everything used to be steam in the building, but then there's just not many people that know how to work on it.
What is it?
The-
How many temperature zones did you say there were? Seven?
7.
Doesn't matter. Military installation, September 15th, the steam goes on. If you're in South Carolina, it's 32 degrees out, you come back to the barracks and friggin' it's hot.
So, if I told you I was,
April 15th, it goes off.
I was out at 29 Palms, you know where that's at?
Yeah,
Palm Springs.
It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It was miserable.
It's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat. So that job was, yeah, but, so of all places, yeah, 127 degrees in the, 110, 115, 120 in the summer. And then they have like this pool out in front where, that's like their water treatment. And those Marines be running, you know, and sometimes you go to the base and you do water treatment, and those guys are out there running. Yeah. I think you got sent there for punishment. I don't think that was like.
Yeah, good me.
Yeah, cause,
That'd be San Diego, right?
well, Camp Pendleton's the nice weather, so, yeah, so 29 Palms is in the desert. It's like, yeah, it's like east of LA.
About 3 hours.
There's two places, there's Arizona and San Diego, I believe.
Yeah, you know that they did get mad when we would tell them, because the NAVFAC, the Navy facilities was actually who we reported to, because that was who the owner was, so that's what paid us. And then you would
Be
tell them.
130 and 100%.
we went Circle W, it was 200 degrees in the boardroom.
I remember something. That was
Used to shut down down ways.
Navy is the delivery for the Marines.
Yeah.
I'd have to go up there and sure.
Well, hopefully I helped give you guys a little bit of information. If you have anything else, I mean,
We didn't have
Feel
Circle
free.
W.
always Doug Adam there,
You got
he's a
no
pretty good
knowledge.
dude.
Yeah, thank you, Tony, I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
And like he said, Cochran Supply, we're a local HVAC controls distributor.
Where are you at?
We're on Brook Park, right where the Jennings dead ends.
Wow.
Brook Park, right where the Jennings, highway.
Just
dead
tell them where
ends.
the restaurant is next to you.
Yeah, Poo-Poo Syria, right next to Poo-Poo
About,
Syria.
what, 200 yards
It's
east
old
of
Mexican
Jennings?
And we've got a training class coming up for PROLON, like I said, I think September or October timeframe. I put business cards around on the table. If you guys are interested, feel free to email me and I can shoot you that link and a cost for that class.
Yeah, we go and we get really deep in that. We go over all the hardware and stuff at the beginning. Today was just kinda, I wanted to try to keep this more tech.
I like the flexibility of this. Or it's not just throw it in, it's already programmed. I like to be able to change things.
Yeah, well, for us, it's the only thing that we do, right? So some of the other brands, like, we don't make drives, we don't make valves, we don't make any of that stuff.
Controls.
This is all we do, and this is all we focus on, the small buildings, that's it.
And what would it cost ballpark for that box right there,
Oh, gosh,
board.
that's
And
that's
easy payments of $5,000.
that's an added,
$49.99.
that's an added question. I'm a technical guy, I don't get too.
I'd have to
technical
look, I
price.
wanna say ballpark on it's around 1,500. I'd have to look.
So it's cheaper than doing
Yeah,
this.
for that demo board.
So it's cheaper than doing this.
Maybe. Yeah, it might be. But you got a lot of neat things on there, twisting temperature sensors.
And when we tell people, like, you know, if you have a weird application and you bring it to Adam's a little unsure, like, don't call us,
Oh, yeah.
because we have some really quirky stuff
And where's PROLON's home office?
in Mirabel, which is outside Montreal. So they're Quebecers. They're French Quebecers.
Quebecers.
You have to go
Eh?
and install sensors everywhere, and our building just, do you remember, one wire back there? Yes, no, or,
No, you have to wire this, you essentially wire the sensors to the controller, and then the controllers will wire between one another.
Most of the time, the zone dampers are usually spread out throughout the space, so like if we had one here, you know, it may be up around
So
the
a
single
twisted
tile.
pair could
So that-
connect the two together?
Wall sensor would get wired.
I don't think
The
you're allowed
wall
to say
into that
twisted
VAV.
pair anymore, are you?
And those are all daisy chained together with a 2-wire pair back. So instead of like the more residential style running systems where you're home running all of your RWIG back
Yeah.
panels,
Did you happen to
this is
know
daisy
of,
chaining everything on
a
the
couple of
space.
installs?
So it should be a little bit less on the wiring install costs.
Adam,
What's that?
Do,
I'm sorry, what was that?
to look at a couple places that have around here in Cleveland.
Yeah. Like you'd like me to come out and take a look at it with you?
no,
Yeah, oh yeah.
places to show him, like
Where it's
Like-
already
Oh,
installed.
Like-
Robbins would be a great one.
Yeah, Robbins.
Robbins is a large system, 2 roof
I don't know what
tops.
they will charge you for that, but.
And you can actually take a tour of the mining machine.
Yeah.
Did you go in that, and you didn't go into the other building through the tunnel?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Did
I
you?
went there with Tom, cause we had to look at a steam, or a hot water valve, a 3-way valve that he had out of his shed.
So what's this building?
Was that,
What's this building you're talking about?
it's a office building,
Yeah.
right, headquarters.
Out in Solon.
Yeah, the other thing that we do on zone systems is we actually modulate the dampers. It's not just open or close. So they're
I
gonna,
think there was like 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, right?
no, that's when I test. That's for the commissioning.
That's when you're looking for duct static.
You can set it to whatever you want. You do all kinds of stuff.
It is very flexible, and like I said, the intent is not, you know, I always tell people, if it's a small building, that you're trying to control, like, give us the first right of refusal to tell you that we can't do it. There's a lot of people that sometimes make assumptions that we can't do things. So we tell
What's
them,
right of refusal?
don't just assume that we can't do it, ask us first.
Okay.
Yeah, give us the opportunity to tell you we can't do it, right?
You can't do the shut, forget it.
Too big. Unless, now I will tell you that there's a guy that's got UPS, like, I don't know how many millions of square feet, but they're all just mega bears. Direct fire mega bears.
Really depends on the application.
It does depend on the application. We can do up to, this controller right here can do 127 controllers underneath of it. So like that project is, I don't know how many million square feet, but it's a bunch, but the equipment is simple. So, really,
Yeah.
I didn't do death by PowerPoint tonight, which I probably should have, because it would have answered a lot of these
thank you.
questions. but-
Some of the cool points about this is the non-proprietary, fully backwards compatible.
Right.
That's huge.
Software's free.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, no charge for the
No
software.
licensing.
yeah.
No licensing.
My question is, so going back, cause you had the guy with the blinky lights and whatnot, so did you guys incorporate it, or no, that was just like a one and done, and that was it?
Well,
Or,
we did that in our Flex IO controller.
so we can now have a system that we can, add and see what the unit's pressures, refrigerant pressures are now?
Yeah, we have a Flex IO controller that would do that, yeah. Like, there are people who put in,
Is that expensive?
No, not at all. You could even use a flex to turn on outside lights if you wanted to automate.
Well,
some
the
outside
expensive
lights.
part isn't the controller, it's the transducers
Well,
probably.
that's, but,
Yeah.
but is that something that we,
Yeah.
like, we get those and then we just use your control, or you?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I even had a mechanical contractor that ran into a train unit, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was doing, but it was like it was using refrigerant pressure, and as that pressure would increase, it would open a damper.
Yeah,
That
Oh,
was-
for head pressure control?
Yeah.
that's the old
There was
style
one of
train.
those still working?
Yeah, so that died, and Train didn't make it anymore, maybe they did and it was expensive. He took the Flex IO, the small one, which is maybe $300, and put a transducer in, and had that control just a normal
It was a
Arduino actuator.
bellows, like hydraulic
Had a piston-
actuator.
had a piston
They were
on it.
about $400 a piece in the mid-90s, and when the bellows failed, it blew all 400 pounds of
Yeah.
22 out of it.
But they worked remarkably well.
Yeah, but like I had one that was 2-circuit, So I took, I put a drive on the one fan, shut the other fan went on and off outdoor temperature, but it was 2 circuits. So I took a DC power supply, 2 transducers, and a comparator card, and whichever signal was higher would run the fan to that. So you could still run one circuit without the other
Yeah.
on a VFD. It got rid of those dampers, cause I had done that one twice
Yeah.
in the
Is that another
90s, and it was expensive
Is
then.
that
I
another
wouldn't want
job
to know.
on the cloud that you guys have, that
So,
two-story one?
we could have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there's a lot of options with that.
But, yeah, well, I don't have access.
They're heavy too.
To it because they are.
I had to take it off.
When you go in there, you can use the one at North.
No, we,
You
there's
gotta
still one.
use your.
I still got
guess
bushings
what
laying around my
line,
garage.
the
Lots of bushings on the pins.
The tablet, which they have passwords.
Well, you're right about the pistons, man, when they rupture, they rupture.
You know,
That's the reason why I was
do you guys
asked
have a
about-
password on that tablet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's password protected, because what we did, it's actually pretty
No, it
neat.
makes sense, cause I never had a tablet glitch on me, but the tablets that I've always used, I've never used the password.
Oh, okay.
So it just
So,
triggered something in my mind.
the controllers are above the ceiling grid, but then we mounted the tablet right on the wall, so
Right.
it's easy to get to. But because it's on the wall, we wanted it password protected. 'Cause
Right,
anybody's
right,
gonna
right.
access it.
That's why that triggered, that's why I asked. I've never had them locked, but I've never used
So
the
now you
password.
can redirect on that.
Yeah.
Get that.
So there are people who use the flex, like what you're saying is, it's just 9, you can do 9 inputs, or it can be analog or digital. It's hard to see this, but like I have guys that use these just to monitor like the glycol loops and these little microbreweries, and they put a network controller, and then they set up an alarm in case, so they're
Are those
monitoring
all
the glycol
inputs or-
temperatures. That's it.
Yeah, there's not, that's the big controller, so you got
Yeah, that's the big one.
9 universal inputs, and then, what is it, 5 digital out?
5
and
digital
3
out,
analog
yeah,
out.
3 analog out.
Set that brewery
Nomar
thing
used to have 3 passwords.
Terry's at.
One was just a look,
That's-
second level was temporary
that
until
brewery,
11:59
things are all over
PM
the place.
tonight, and then it goes back. And the third
Be
one
nice
is
to have
where,
there.
so the third one,
Where's that?
unless you know what you're doing, don't ever
Right.
find the third one.
Yeah, we have 2, we have standard and advanced. Standard can just change set
Can we
points.
just do a compressor and all that there? It might be easier to,
We quoted all
cost
this.
just to have a temporary.
We
So if
have.
you really screw up, and if
No,
it's
you didn't want the dampers in that space at
Yes,
all.
we've had people.
I don't
ask
blame
for
it.
that.
You got,
It's something we.
it's all in open space.
temporary, I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Right.
Don't give me the third one.
Yeah, the other thing is to remember,
Classified brand.
if you override these things, and if they cycle power to them, they'll lose the override on power cycle.
What's right?
Software override.
I stopped in there yesterday when it was warm and waiting.
So sometimes if it's acting up, sometimes just like the IT guys, did you cycle power?
Yeah.
No,
They have battery backup in them?
They do not.
it's working great, thanks.
No. The M2000, since it has a real time clock, it's a small, I think it's like a little capacitor in there.
Oh,
But if it goes too long,
yeah, a blink,
When it's summertime like this, you want
4 hours.
spend more
the
time.
flex, people use for a lot of stuff, man. We had one,
Yeah,
I think
the
it's one of
e-terminals.
Aaron's customers, called and they're like doing a grow room, and they wanted to basically, yeah, for marijuana. Tomatoes. I always tell people chicken pot pie are my 3 favorite things, right?
That's what they.
They wanted, when the CO2 got above 5,000 parts per million, they wanted to start like the makeup air unit and the exhaust, and then when it would drop below, drop out below 2,500 CO2, or 2,500 parts per million. They had like 4 zones, but they also wanted a button on the wall. That was like an override timer. So we just had them put in like the $60, $50, like Lutron, Leviton, like 2 hour, 4 hour, 6 hour, 8 hour. And then we had them use like an RIB-U1C, we could put 120 volts to it. And then, yeah, we just used a rib relay, and then we brought it in as an input along with the 4 CO2 sensors, and then what we did is we just paralleled all 4, 5 outputs. So that if any one of them came on, it would start the unit, but then if you go in and look at it, you can see which one called for the unit to start.
I think that's the one that's up by me, cause they've got a big dispensary road thing, and it was big right up in the paper, because they're supposed to have, when
supposed to go through all these filters, this and that, real elaborate.
Is that why when you
Well, it
come
don't-
down
it
for work,
don't.
you laugh so much?
Well, that explains one of the reasons why, cause I'm standing above it, but, two, no, the house next to it, when they release all that gas, you can't hardly stand the smell, because it's literally like, you know.
Well, I think they use chemicals too. I think there's some chemicals. Daikin I was at a presentation that Daikin did all about, because I think they release chemicals to force the plants to grow along. They put something in with the CO2.
Yeah, but then. I got it.
Yeah. No, but I know what you're saying though, because it does.
Give it away your side joke, Brian.
No,
No, they don't do it with the CO2, they do it with this.
Well, I did.
If I was doing that, I wouldn't be doing this.
What do you think?
We've had a couple of customers who grow outside.
Well, because typically whoever, like a lot of those guys have always dealt with like I don't know what you call HVAC guys that aren't very good, but a lot of those. But they're dealing with like,
Homer and Gomer.
yeah, they'll just call Homer and Gomer, like they just don't know, like, they're like, we just wanna grow, make money, sell them.
Parts changers.
And so they get these guys and then,
They weed.
yeah, well, almost all of those places, one of the critical things for their whole business is the ventilation.
Yep.
And they're hiring people that don't know anything about ventilation to begin with, let alone, they might know, the only thing they probably know about marijuana is stop smoking. I know this is probably a little mean of me to say, but it's like, you don't have people that understand your product, you don't have people that even understand the system, and so I hear these horror stories of these grow facilities that, you know, they got spiral duct and it's all over the place and it's a horrible, you know, of course you can walk into any building and probably catch that too, but it's,
That wasn't Steve.
you know,
That was-
there's a lot of weird applications.
Rick Moranis.
People just, I have one where a guy, all he does is he just uses a flex IO and he just lead lags 2 pumps and turns them on when the outside air goes below a certain temperature, that's it. That's all he uses it for. So, sometimes people are always like, they think about PROLON and they think like I have to do the whole building. It's not necessarily always, you know, it's not like an all or none thing. Yeah.
The guy that owns All Pro Trucking lives in the $10 million home. He has his own 13,000 volt transformer. He's got a 400 amp panel, a 400 amp panel, an 80 amp panel.
And how good is his air conditioning? Like, have you
He's
been there? Or
He's
not?
got 7 complete heat, cool, ventilation, dehumidifier, 7 systems.
Did he spend a lot of money? I seen one that they did, it was a disaster, I got called in because they were having troubles controlling it. And they put ductwork in.
on there.
And every single one of those 7
Well, it was a multi-million-dollar house and they were having problems because what they would do is the living room was fed by half of this unit and half of this unit, and this unit would kick on, and this unit would kick on, and then they couldn't redo anything because it was all it was all in ductboard.
But they wanted to be cold,
Yeah.
and they wanted 64 degrees all year round, and then everything sweats. And
They say they do.
Yeah.
What's that?
So they couldn't redo, they just couldn't, they would have had to rip it all out.
Been there, done that, I know.
Yeah.
One fat banker wanted it, and his whole house leaked. It
This
was
$10
what you're
million
designing
house
to.
had only 15 amp receptacles in the entire house, not one
Don't sell
single
anyone how to live
20
their life.
amp receptacle.
But they saved a lot of money. Probably 3 cents an outlet. Isn't that funny? That is crazy.
Tony, let's close out
Yeah,
on
you guys-
let's close out on Facebook Live, and you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
can continue talking, so, thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks, Tony.
See you guys, thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Yep.
Yay.